Guys, welcome to the next installment of the Woodford Sports Science Consulting Podcast. Today, I've got a very, very special guest for all you guys. I mean, we've gone back and forth probably about 10 times. So it's probably taken at least 3 months to get right and get for me to interview him. But we're both very busy. Terry Condon. Welcome, Terry.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me.
Beautiful. So, Terry, if you just, for all the listeners out there, obviously, in terms of when I first started Woodford Sports Science Consulting, one of the big things I wanted to do was help applied sports science, strength and conditioning go mainstream. So help these kids, give them a light at the end of the tunnel in terms of they all do exercise science degrees, give them someone to look up to and say, hey, I want to do this. I want to become a strength coach in Australia, even though the industry isn't very well developed. Just give a background on who you are, what you've done, and your qualifications and your coaching experience for all the listeners out there.
All right. Without being too self-indulgent,
we don't like that. At the moment, Terry, come on, we don't like that at WSSC. We don't like that.
So at the moment, I'm consulting through the AIS for the Australian men's and women's sevens.
Yep.
In the past, I've done a little bit with the Australian Rugby Union, working there doing the rehabilitation coordination for all their nationally contracted athletes, so Wallabies. And I've been at the Richmond Food Club prior to that. So they're probably the 3 sort of main roles. And then in and around that, I've worked with some Winter Olympians. One Winter Olympian, a couple of talented young soccer players, tennis athletes as well. But predominantly those have been my that's probably been my main sort of experience, and been doing the job or working in sport for the past 9 years.
And that's elite sport. You've been working in elite sport for the past 9 years.
Elite sport. I think it's 7 years, and then sub-elite prior to that.
Yeah. And what's your for all the we get a lot of people who watch my podcast, a lot of students. What's your academic background for everyone out there? What have you done academically?
It's not a very illustrious academic career, unfortunately, and probably a lot of kids will be disappointed to hear that. But I've done my undergrad, did my postgrad, did my honours, and pretty much after that, I was fortunate enough to sort of get straight into elite sport once I'd finished that. So I haven't really progressed the academic side of things. So that's not to say that I've stopped studying. Actually, I've probably increased my studies since then. Just in terms of formal education, that's where it stopped for me.
Yeah. For all the listeners out there, I mean, Terry and I both had the same honours supervisor, Dr. Alan Pearce. So both of us are lucky to have Dr. Al as our supervisors. Both of us have done undergrad. Terry, both of us done honours. In terms of a lot of kids who ask questions to myself and my company, and I'm going to ask Terry this question. For a strength coach, what qualifications do you need? I'm sure you get asked this a lot by a lot of young kids. I get asked that a lot. What academic qualifications do you think you need? Because you work in elite sport. I'm in the private sector. What do you think you need in elite sport? Because everyone's got undergrad. What do you think sets everyone apart from the rest?
It's a bit of a hard question for me to answer because for myself, I know that I went and did a lot of probably independent study, and I went and did a lot of different things that don't necessarily qualify as, you don't have letters after your name, you don't get CEC points for them.
Yeah.
I kind of place a heavy emphasis on self-education, so I'm not really concerned about, what I get after I've done that course. It's more so what I can give after I've done it. So, I don't really believe there's any one way to I suppose, get a result. If you've got your undergrad, that's the best place to start. And you will know probably the majority of what you need to know from a technical sense, and it's up to you to then fill the gaps in terms of what is required within the industry and where you'd like to go in terms of an area of specialty or expertise. Now, I wouldn't claim to know what everyone wants to sort of get into, but for myself, I've sort of specialised in the return to play aspect of rehabilitation, and started off generally in strength and conditioning, and then I've sort of moved into the more rehab side of things. So I did a few courses, but as I said, nothing I did some stuff at Athletes Performance a few years ago, or over in the States, and I went and saw a few coaches over there as well, just to kind of do my own professional development.
Did you pay for that yourself? Did you pay for that yourself?
Oh, and I was lucky enough to be already in elite sport and had that sort of budget. So some of it I did. Some of the stuff I did before I got into elite sport, I definitely sort of paid for out of my own pocket. But after that, I was lucky enough to have an organisation that wanted to develop me as much as I wanted to develop myself. So
yeah. In terms of, I mean, you brought up a point before. You said kind of you were obviously young when you first got into elite sport, but you kind of found a niche market in terms of that return to play. For everyone out there, I mean, this is a big issue that we have specifically. A lot of people don't understand the roles of the strength coach, the physiotherapist, the rehab coach. I mean, you're smack bang in the middle between the physiotherapist and the strength coach. Can you just explain to everyone out there and the students and all the fans out there, what is your job and what do you believe return to play is in terms of your job?
Yeah, so you pretty much hit the nail on the head, mate. Like, I just sit in the middle of the two. I'm a trained S&C coach, so I have a performance kind of emphasis, and the way I kind of look at things is performance. But I've also been heavily influenced by some quality physiotherapists that I've worked alongside. So I guess I've spent my career trying to learn how to speak enough of both languages to be able to adequately work within the two realms. Because it really is about bridging that gap. So you need to have a really, really strong understanding of pathology as well as performance. And it's if you're coming from too much on one side of the spectrum, there's actually sort of a bit of a disconnect, and that's where sort of problems can arise. So for my mind, like a lot of the courses and stuff you alluded to before, some of those things are actually more sort of physical therapy based. And all it's been about is being able to sort of, as I said, speak the same language as both the physiotherapist and the performance guy. So you need to know where you got to get them back to. So you've got to understand that aspect of the game and how to sort of condition someone to that point. And it was good for me to sort of, I suppose, start my grounding in that sense and then move towards the physiotherapy because it just sort of helped me to develop those skill sets basically.
In terms of your methodologies, I always talk about my methodologies, what I believe in terms of developing the total athlete. In terms of your methodologies, in terms of athlete development, rehabilitation, what is your methods in terms of training the whole athlete?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of subscribe to the idea that you're working with a person first and a performer second. So my main philosophy is if the person doesn't trust you, then you're going to find it hard to get the most out of them and yourself in that interaction. So the number one thing for me is that anyone that I'm working with understands that I know who they are, where they're going, and I would like to help them get there, basically. So I think if you lack that, then the rest of it's irrelevant.
So you're saying buy-in's obviously very important.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but buy into you as a person, I think, as a professional. So the person's got to, in their own mind, sort of come to the conclusion that you're someone that can help them. You're someone that cares about what they want, not what you want, and you'd care enough to do something about it, basically.
Okay. I mean, just for all the listeners out there, sorry, Terry, to interrupt, but for all the listeners out there, when I first met Terry, I actually got told that Terry was quite different in terms of his coaching philosophies and his methods. That's not to say that he doesn't believe in physiology, anatomy, neuroscience. It's not to say he doesn't buy in that, but his coaching, and correct me if I'm wrong, Terry, but your coaching philosophy is more based around the individual and being a coach rather than, obviously you approve of the science. The science is very important, but you look at a person and you develop the person. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, that's right, mate. Yeah, I think a good person makes a good athlete.
Yeah.
And I think it has to start there. And for my mind, like a lot of, we talked earlier about what sort of qualifications you need and that sort of thing. What I did was I went out and studied who are the best coaches and who have been the best coaches and what do they do differently. And so, you look back through, and one of the all-time classics for me was John Wooden. John Wooden very simple in his approach in terms of what he actually did. But the way he did it was what made all the difference. And I think, there's a story that he talks about in one of his books, and he's just such a process-focused individual. He was very concerned about making sure any athlete that came into his system really understood where he was coming from and the philosophies that he wanted to espouse toward his team. And he said, we control all the controllables. So there's a story that he wrote about in his book where a new kid comes in, and the first thing he does is he sort of walks him into the dressing room and says, this is how I want you to put your kit on. He says, I want you to put your socks on. I want you to like clean off your shoe, clean off your feet, put your socks on. Make sure you put your socks on like this so there's no folds underneath your toes, because if there's a fold underneath your toe, you'll get a blister. And if you get a blister, you'll get distracted from the game. So put your socks on this way. And so John Wooden's a massive influence on me because he's a very process-focused, very athlete-centered individual.
Yeah.
And I sort of have worked to try and replicate that with myself and start from that point and work towards the pointy end. And I think we learn about the technical side of things in our undergrads and all that sort of thing, but we miss the tactical side of things, and that's actually what, in my mind, makes most of the difference.
In terms of, that's a very good point you bring up in terms of the undergrad degree, and this is nothing against the universities. And you and I, Terry, have talked about this before in terms of the kids coming out. I don't think they've got a real grasp on what it's like to be a real coach. And I think they teach the theoretical side, but in terms of the practical side, I don't think they equip them the best way possible. And yes, you have to be a self-learner, but in your opinion, what do you think kids and universities should be doing better in terms of preparing these kids to be a coach, to develop as a coach and develop more effectively?
I think it's hard because when you're learning anything, you'll be very dogmatic in your approach in the beginning, just because of when you don't know much. It's like that old maxim: when all you've got to hammer, everything looks like a nail. Yeah. So I think in the beginning, when you've got limited sort of tools and you haven't had a lot of time to apply them and to measure their response and get feedback on how they work or don't work or work in different situations, then you will be quite black and white. And the sooner you can get out of that outlook, the better off you'll be as a coach, in my opinion. We've got new fads that come along every year. You got 5-3-1 happens a few years ago. Everyone sort of jumps on top of that. Different pieces of equipment come out, and they're always the answer, right? But methods come and go, but principles don't change. So in my mind, the best thing you can do as a coach is to try and differentiate principles from methods. If you stick with principles, you'll be pretty safe most of the time. And principles are things that prove themselves over time and time again. So the best thing you can do is look back through history. And that's what I did early in my sort of career, was study the history of strength training and understand what they've been doing for decades. And those things that are still around and those tenets that have stood the test of time, you're pretty safe with those. So if a method comes along and it's aligned with one of those tenets, you're pretty safe to use that method and do quite well. But if a method comes along and it's completely out of any of that, then you'd probably be best to leave it alone.
I guess you're talking about not reinventing the wheel, keeping it simplistic as possible in terms of your methodologies. When you brought up a good one, the 5-3-1, West Side Barbell Method, the cube, what is the best way to develop athlete strength or power? This is all just in the same realm. It's just different somatics on your loading parameters, but I'm a big advocate of just simplistic programming at a high level and keeping the quality real high. And I guess you'd be similar in terms of your approach, integrating with the skill to make it. Obviously, transference is a big deal and understanding how to transfer. But at the end of the day, what we do is quite simplistic. But in my opinion, I don't know what you think about this, but I think a lot of people, because as you said, everyone wants to know about the fucking latest fad. What's the newest gimmick coming out? At the end of the day, what has stood the test of time? What works? I don't know what your take on all that stuff is.
Yeah, I agree, mate. Like it's I'm like the next guy. That I want to learn and sort of have a look at the next new thing as well. But I try not to get too caught up in whether it's going to be the answer, because I know it's not. If it's another tool that I can put in my sort of toolbox, that's fantastic. But I also understand that it's not going to apply in many situations. So just because I learnt the tool doesn't mean that the next person that comes along has to sort of, I have to use that tool on that person, because often it's not, and that's probably one of the biggest dangers, I reckon, when you're learning, is that, as I said, when all you've got is a hammer, everything looks like a tool. So everything looks like a nail. Sorry. I think the challenge is to remain athlete centered. And I was guilty of this early days as well. And you'll learn something new, and you're going to look through rose-colored glasses with that method. So everyone that comes along, you're like, oh, I learned that. That's going to be the answer for you. But is it really? Are you really thinking about what the athletes need? That might mean what they need might mean that you have to go out and learn something different. And oftentimes that's the case. And you learn that the hard way sometimes, where you start to apply methods that you'd like to use instead of what need to be used. And then you actually end up sort of having to go back and learn something else, because you realise that hammer doesn't work so well in this situation.
I mean, I think a big issue, especially in terms of our industry, and especially in the private sector, which I've found, is an athlete comes in and you want to kind of pinch a hole in a certain methodology, like everything works. Exactly what you said, especially and I did it at the start as well. I just thought you stick to one methodology and that's the one tool that you're going to use and it's going to work for everyone. But as you grow as a strength coach and you grow as a person and you understand what works and what doesn't, you realize that you need to be more holistic, more athlete-centered. And exactly what you said, it's just a tool in a toolbox, isn't it? Depending on what adaptation we're after will dictate what tool we use. And I think that is the biggest issue I see today in the private sector. You'd know more about the elite sector, but I think we're confined to the fact that if you're a powerlifting guy, you're going to use mainly powerlifting methods. If you're an Olympic lifting guy, you're going to mainly use Olympic lifting. If you're a CrossFit guy, and you know what CrossFit is like, they think they can do everything, they're going to use that. But for me, it's always been like, what tool do I need to use to specifically yield that adaptation with that athlete? So it all comes down to the athlete and what they need. And in terms of what your approach is, I think it's brilliant. I think it's athlete-centered. You know, I love the way, and this is for all the especially young students coming out. You know, Terry's a great guy to learn off. One, he's in the industry. Number two, he was very young when he got in. So, man, to learn off a guy like him would be a great opportunity for you guys. Even if you ask him questions, he's just a wealth of knowledge. So, for me, when we first had this conversation on Skype, we Skyped for about an hour and a half before Terry's Skype just cut out. It was really good to get his mindset, because he doesn't think he's like any other coach. I've never talked to a coach like him, because he thinks completely differently, and not in a bad way, different in a way that gets you to think, well, I never thought about it like that. And for me personally, as a person, as a coach, I always like to talk to different people, what makes them successful. So I know, Terry, you're running courses for a lot of students who don't get obviously there's a lot of students going through exercise science, and one thing, as you know, what I've done with Woodford SSCs was trying to evoke more change and open up more jobs. Now, as you know, and you'll tell the people watching today, there's not many jobs in elite sports. The chance of a lot of people getting jobs in elite sport is not high. You're running courses on how to best facilitate and get that job. Do you just want to give my viewers an understanding of what you're doing and why you're doing it, and just explain a little bit more about it?
Yeah, I guess it just started from a conversation I was having with a young coach that I've sort of spent a bit of time with up at the Sydney Academy of Sport, and one of his mates, I had the pleasure of meeting him. Very driven young man, gone out and done a lot of his own stuff, and you know, we basically, those guys sort of said to me, you know, can we pick your brain for an hour or so? And we ended up doing it on a Saturday night, because that's what we do, because we're nerds. And anyway, so mate, we got to the gym at sort of 8 o'clock on a Saturday night, and I didn't leave there till 11.
8 o'clock on a Saturday night.
8 o'clock on a Saturday night, we're talking shop.
Gee, I love that, man. I love that. I love that.
And anyway, so I left there at like 11:30, because I said, my girlfriend's probably going to have questions about this. But mate, I left and they stayed till 1 o'clock, and I was following up with my mate, and I asked him how that sort of young coach was going, and he sort of mentioned to me, he said, you know, he's you know, what does he need to do to get a job? Because in my mind, he's ready, you know. And I would say that most people, as I said, in the technical sense, are ready, but it's the tactical side of things what make all the difference. And the hard thing with elite sport is that it really is the pointy end of the game. And I think I wrote something a few weeks ago about one of my first lectures at uni. I remember walking in and we had sort of 250 odd exercise science students, and the lecturers sort of said, you know what, the chances of you guys getting a job are minimal. There's like, I think he said something like on average, 5 jobs a year in elite sport in this country. Competing for those jobs will be most of you guys, plus all the graduates from the last 3 to 5 years, plus people with experience from this country and other countries. So it's like the chances of you walking out of here and getting a job are minimal. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, that's going to be tough. but not impossible, mate, because that's what I did. So I guess I look at that situation, I try to reverse engineer what I did and what sort of worked for me and what I think differentiated me and gave me those opportunities where other people might not get them, because there's a lot of deserving people out there, but just, you know, they're not in the right spot at the right time. They're in the wrong environment. They're with the wrong people, and they're doing the wrong things in terms of their own sort of study. And so what I sort of try to do is put together a bit of a presentation around some of the principles that I sort of used to fast track that sort of progression through my career and sort of give me that opportunity quicker than might have otherwise been earned. And I've no doubt there's an element of luck toward it as well, but I was also in the right spot at the right time. So it's really just about trying to sort of pass that knowledge on to young coaches that do have the same ambitions and deserve the same opportunities, basically.
For all those people watching out there, especially the people who do want to get into elite sport, they do want to become a strength coach in Australia. In elite, we're talking about elite sport, we're not talking about private, but in elite sport, what best advice can you give these people who want to do it? Because everyone, like, man, fuck, you know how it is. Everyone wants to work in elite sport. You do exercise science, you go around the room, you question 100 people, you'd say 90%, 90 of them would say, I want to work in elite sport. What advice can you give them to hopefully facilitate that?
Yeah, I think coming back to that lecture, the first lecture that I spoke about at uni, a week later, I think that the number of students in that lecture went from 250 to 90. And I think that's a massive thing is who's going to want to persist, and who's going to want to work long enough or hard enough. That's a massive part of it. But it's also who's going to work smart. So you have to work hard. That's a given. If you want to make it to the top, you actually have to work hard. But you also have to work smart, and you don't want to be a clone of everybody else. So one thing that I would say, it's a bit of a stuff in the course, but work to disprove something before you prove it. If you really want to understand something, you need to be able to argue both sides of the case. So don't just sort of buy what you're fed at university or through a course or whatever. Go away, try and disprove it. Because if you come out, just sort of eating everything they get, just sort of taking in everything you're given, then you're just going to sprout the same sort of concepts that every other student's going to spout. And what differentiates you? Sorry, mate.
Phones, Terry, come on.
So I just think I sort of did that almost by accident because I was a little bit more passionate, and I was interested in getting some results for myself. So I started to do a lot of my own research, and I found that a lot of what I was learning myself and the results that I was getting were sometimes disproving what I was learning at university.
So you could say it's pretty much don't accept everything they're telling you. Try and do your own learning. So it's kind of like self-learning. Use that theory, but then be able to apply it for yourself and at the same time justify it, and don't just accept it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, don't accept. You definitely, I mean, even what I'm saying to you today, like you should go away and say, just see how it fits for you, then think for yourself. If it works for you and it's something that you resonate with, go ahead and sort of pursue that. And I kind of like to put myself through like almost immersion training. So I'll look at one subject and I'll just go and study everything with regards to that subject. So we talk about skill acquisition. Right. And I see a massive parallel in skill acquisition in rehab because a lot of the time you're retraining the nervous system, correct?
Correct. Very correct.
And, so basically I've gone and I've gone, right, okay, if I see that parallel, I'm going to go look at everything, skill acquisition, see how that applies to my job in rehab. So, you start with the popular sort of content, and that's, like things like the 10,000 hour rule and that sort of thing, and, Malcolm Gladwell, that's the surface level stuff. And you start reading, you keep going further, you keep going deeper, you get a deeper appreciation for it, and you understand there's a guy called Anders Ericsson who's behind it all. And if you start looking at Anders Ericsson's work, then you can really understand the whole subject of skill acquisition from the inside out. But if you just look at Malcolm Gladwell's work and say it's all about 10,000 hours, that's wrong. It's not. It's just a piece of the puzzle. So, I read that 10,000 hour book. I don't just accept that that's it and I stop there. I just keep going.
Yeah.
So it's just about it's about persistence in your self-education and about sort of wanting to get to the truth and the truth as it relates to you. So, everything can be argued both ways. That's a basic point of philosophy. Everything can and should be argued both ways. So if you can't see both sides of it, you don't understand the subject well enough.
I think you bring a very valid point. I think it really comes down to what are you willing to sacrifice to get yourself in that job? What is making you the difference? Because if you look at it and Terry Condon comes out, Terry Condon's got an undergrad degree, he's got an honours, yet a lot of people have got an undergrad and honours. You got to think to yourself, and this is for everyone out there, what sets you apart? So what did Terry do that set him apart from every other student, every other aspiring student coach at the elite level? And you got to start asking yourself questions, especially in the private sector. And personally for me, and Terry will tell you this, I mean, Terry, how long did you do free work experience for? I mean, I did it for 5-6 years, and I'd still, there's not much money in junior elite sport, but I had to intern. I'm sure you would have done the same, intern, free work experience, skill yourself up. I mean, how long did you do that for?
Yeah, I think I did 3 years, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, like it's tough times, but it's what makes you, I think. Like it actually, I wouldn't trade that for a second because you would not value it. You wouldn't value it half as much if you just, I talk about how I walked out of uni and walked straight into a job, but I didn't.
You didn't really.
No, I was working three different jobs, started a home business, wrote a thesis in that last year just to get by, basically.
Yeah.
And then I was interning alongside that. So that was a tough year, that sort of took me right to my edge. But, when it happens and when someone turns around and says to you, you know what, I'm going to give you a salary for everything you've been doing for free for the last 3 years, it's a pretty good day.
It's a bit of self-satisfaction, really, because you've done the work. And there's someone saying to you, shit, man, Terry, you've busted your ass, or Christian, you've busted your ass. To get to that end of that rainbow and say, shit, man, fuck, I deserve this, and no one gave me this, I worked my ass for it. For everyone out there and anyone watching you, if you do want to go to elite sport and you bust your ass and you do what Terry did and you do what Hampo did and all the guys I know in elite sport and you put the work in, and at the end of the day, you hit that position, within your heart you've done it. And Terry brings up a very valid point, and it's funny because all these kids that I hire, most of the guys that I hire have done what I've done and they had to work for free. And just let everyone know, when I went to America, I didn't get paid. I paid for my development. I interned there and I paid my way the whole time. But as Terry said, you wouldn't give it up for the world because it makes you as a person. And all my guys on staff, most of them have done what I've done because they, as Terry said, they appreciate being a coach, because this industry, be it private or elite, it's fucking hard and it's hard to make a buck. And to look back at your life and say, fuck, man, I did something special and I worked my ass off to get there, and be it elite, be it private, because it is a privilege to train athletes, be it amateur, sub-elite or elite. It's a privilege, and don't ever take that for granted. Am I right in saying that, Terry? You tell me, you're the elite man. What do you think?
No, mate, you're 100% on the money there. Like, I see it as a real privilege as well.
Yeah.
And it's something that needs to be earned. So, it's all about that sacrifice in the end. And after that, it is what you make it. And it's who wants to work hardest? Who wants to work smartest as well, I think. And I think everyone's working hard now. The world's small, right? So everyone can go do another degree, everyone can do another master's and that sort of thing, but I really don't think that matters. It's how do you make yourself indispensable in whoever's eyes that you'd like to employ you. So You might be interning, but are you interning in a way that makes them think, geez, I tell you what, that bloke, he's finishing up in 3 months and we actually don't know how we're going to replace him. Are you interning in that way, or are you just turning up and expecting that, you can put it next to your resume and someone will turn around and give you a job for it? Because there's a massive difference between those two things.
I think you bring up a valid point, especially when you intern, and Terry, what Terry's saying is making it indispensable, is to say, are you really putting your heart into this? Are you throwing everything into it? Are you really learning in the theory and the applied aspect of being a coach? Or are you just turning up for the sake of, hey, I'm putting on my resume? So, I think that's a big difference. There is a difference between turning up and actually putting your heart into it and learning and developing as a coach. And that's something for all my interns out there who started, I'll give a shout out to them, for the 50 interns who started this week. That is the difference between what's going to happen in your future and your careers. Your career's in your hands. What you want is up to you. Don't sit back and think it's going to fucking happen, because it won't. Terry's living proof. Now, Terry, just quickly to finish off, I've got a few questions for you. First of all, yep. Terry, now this is an interesting one, because Terry is more of, when I first met him on Skype, most of my mates know him, and they said to him he's a different cat. He's very free-spirited. He kind of goes with the flow. He's the opposite of me, where I'm just overly intense. Two different styles completely. But where do you see yourself? Where do you, Terry Condon, see yourself in the next 5 years? Do you see yourself in elite sport, or where do you see yourself going?
Yeah, mate, it's a funny one. It's probably a bit of maybe a little bit of transition ahead for me. I think I've always kind of wanted to get into the business side of things, and I'm sort of dabbling with that a bit now. And this sort of role with AIS is good because I can do a little bit of both, dip my toe in the water with that, start to do the same thing I did 10 years ago, basically. I'm at sort of a ground zero again. So
you never stop learning.
Yeah, but mate, that's the beauty of life. So, so I think in another 5 years, in some sort of way, I'd see myself in business in some way. Having said that, I'd still see myself working with athletes in some sort of way, shape or form. I just have a real passion for, I suppose, the athlete's plight, and I guess that stems from working really closely with them in rehab, because you really get to know the people you're working with, and I think that's the gift of it too, because I've got some really strong relationships with guys that I've worked with in the past, because you're in each other's pockets basically.
Well, rehab, I'm very close with them.
Yeah, you every day, and you're tailoring their plan, and you're talking to them, and you need to get feedback from all the time, and so you develop some pretty, strong bonds, and I've really kind of, I suppose, developed an affinity for the athlete's plight, and I think a lot of people take for granted the opportunity cost of being an athlete in terms of, security and that sort of thing. So in my mind, it'll be something that advocates what's the word? Welfare for athletes.
Yeah.
I can't tell you what that'll be right now, but it'll be something like that, I'd guess.
I just find it interesting from my point of view. You're probably the most well-known, and in my opinion, and I'm biased here because I like you, but the best rehab coach in Australia. Most people, and I've talked to a lot of people, they think you are. From my point of view, to hear a guy say that you could be out of the game in 5 years, I find it interesting. I find it intriguing that this is not like you want to, because for when I started at Woodford SSC, I didn't realise, Terry, the side of, I can be a great strength coach and develop really good programming and develop athletes, but if I'm no good at business, I'll never get bigger. And that's one thing that hit me. I had to learn the business side, and reluctantly I'm learning it, but I'm not the best at it. But like you want to learn that. So it's just interesting to hear different people, because some people would kill for it, and people like you who are in the position, not saying you don't kill for it, you still love it, you're happy to go see where it goes, and there's other things in life.
Well, as I said, it doesn't necessarily might not necessarily mean I'm not doing what I'm doing. It might just be a different form of doing it, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's early days, and I don't know. I don't have a real good answer for you on that one, mate.
Yeah, no, that's all right. All right. So I'm just going to finish up with just a few questions. These are supposed to be really quick, back and forth. Just seeing how we go here. First of all, favourite athlete coached. And look, just before we start, just to let everyone know out there, I'm biased. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I'm a massive Ben Cousins fan. And for everyone out there, Terry used to work at Richmond and he used to work with Ben, so I'm biased here. I would say Ben Cousins because the guy's a physical freak. Favourite athlete coached?
Favourite athlete coach?
Have to be Cuz. Come on, it's got to be Cuz.
It's made. I really like Cuz, but it's not Cuz. That's a real hard question, you know.
Come on, sure you got a favourite, man. You got to have a favourite. I've got a favourite. Jesse Boston's.
Like, there's a couple of young guys at the Tigers that I really
Well, name
sort of
them.
enjoy.
You've got to name them.
I really like working with Dylan Grimes.
Okay.
And Grimes, he's probably an up and comer there, and you know, I think he was in leadership group and that sort of thing.
Yep.
And I really like working with Trent Cochin.
Yep. Captain.
Captain and Matty D, and it's probably the thing about those guys is that you can tell who they are when they play the game. You know who they are. Like they sort of, I don't know what it is. It's about sort of, for me, it's about the way an athlete attacks their sport and the way they sort of put their heart and soul into it. And those guys, they just live and breathe what they do. And I've just got so much respect for the way they go about it and the effort they put in, the intensity they bring to the job, because it does become a job. And there's a couple of others probably that I don't want to forget as well. I did some work with Kel Moore.
They'll probably watch this and they'll say, Terry, why didn't you say me?
Yeah, mate, that's why I said it's a tough question, because, like I said, you develop strong relationships with all of them.
Yeah.
But Nathan Foley and Kelvin Moore were two other blokes that I spent a lot of time with, that I learned a lot from, just as people and the way they kind of went about their experiences in sport. Both dealt with a lot of adversity, and just the way they grit their teeth and dealt with that was something that was, for me, just a really good lesson too.
Best gut runner you've ever seen in sport. Best gut runner. Can I be honest with you? I'm learning the questions here. It should be obvious who's the best gut runner ever. It was just a freak.
I'll tell you. Sorry, I think we might have even spoken about this, and maybe that's why you've asked me the question.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had to do a session with Cuz one day,
just quick, how good was he a runner? He just looked like an absolute freak gut runner. Cuz, if you're watching this, Cuz, you can come down to Woodford SSC anytime, mate, anytime.
Mate, I had to run with him that day, and you know, you can tell when he's getting into it because he starts to grunt like a horse, and he starts to sort of really get the air in the nostrils, and you're like, oh, here we go, he's clicking up into the next gear here. Yeah. And I don't know, and I was like running next to him going, I don't think I've got that gear. But it was funny, because we were doing repeat 200s, and you know, as a coach, you try and do as well as you can, but you've got to understand that you're not elite. That's why you're a coach.
That's why you're a coach.
But we finished that session, and you never want to show how much you're hurting. But geez, I couldn't not show it that day. I had to sit down. I was bugging. I had to really collect myself after that one. So no, he was definitely very good, very good.
Favorite strength prom pattern movement for rehab and athlete performance, and justify why. It could be bilateral, it could be unilateral. It's up to you. Just favorite strength movement.
Oh, shit, that's a good one.
Yes, I know. I thought about that one.
We're talking about strength?
Yeah, just purely strength. We're talking about just a traditional strength training movement.
Yeah, I don't think you can go past a good deadlift.
Yep.
Just that rear chain development, and then just giving you that resilience.
Yeah.
Particularly for a team sport athlete, for me, like just to be strong in that movement, in that lift. It does a lot of good things for you. If we're talking about movement, then I don't think you can go past a kettlebell Turkish get-up.
Why is that?
We were talking about history before, and the history of strength training, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's been used for basically thousands of years to fire up the nervous system, make the body a little bit more supple, get blood flowing to a lot of muscles in a short period of time, and retrain movement patterns. You get good thoracic spine mobility, shoulder stability, hip mobility, core control, just out of one movement. And I just think, like, for the sake of 5 minutes worth of work, I don't think for one exercise, I just think it's a brilliant little primer.
Well, in terms of training full kinetic chain, it's a very good movement, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
Now,
Definitely.
favorite power movement. It could be low load power. It could be high load power. Favorite explosive movement.
Oh, yeah. Again, if we're just talking about the nervous system and power development.
Yeah.
And I'm biased because I've worked mainly with sort of footballs and that sort of thing, so they're not Olympic lifters. You can teach someone to clean relatively well, low risk. So I just like that one because you get that triple extension, you get that fast sort of rate of force development, and it's not as risky as a snatch if something goes wrong.
Ground-based power, always the best. I mean, cleaning, snatch, jerk. I mean, in terms of how we coach it, what we like it, I mean, I believe it clean. In terms of athlete development, it's the king, high load power, high force, high velocity, developing triple extension power. It's my favourite.
Yeah.
Quickly, and this is for everyone out there, when I was first started this company, I've had a lot of guys in the elite sector message me, just give me a lot of respect. Terry's just on the walk right now. But this is to you.
Running out of battery.
Oh, quick. I'll wait till you sit down and answer the question.
Yeah, I got you.
You got it?
Yep.
So, I mean, this is for everyone out there. I'll just explain to them. When I first started this company, I knew I was going to cop a lot of criticism. And I did at the start. And you were one of the guys. And I had about 4 to 5 guys in elite sport message me off their own back and just say some really positive things. You were actually one of them. In your perspective, just for the viewers out there, what do you think in terms of the private sector, in terms of Woodford SSC, the private sector? Where do you see this going? Like, obviously, it's worked for me. It's worked for Woodford SSC. What do you think of it? What will happen with the private sector in the next few years? What do you think? What does Terry Condon think?
No, I think the main thing for me, the positive thing about what you're doing, is just driving it in a more positive direction. Because if I think to myself, I am a 16-year-old athlete, I want to improve my prospects, and I want to get access to good advice and a facility that's actually built for me and it's not built for the average punter. I just think that it's a really positive sort of step in the right direction. So, when you compare what you're offering as compared to your basic fitness first, fucking Virgin Active, and what those guys do, then it's going to be an easy choice. And I just think it's the kind of market, and that's why I message you, is it's in Australia we're so far behind the States in that regard.
Why though? Why?
I just think in elite sport in Australia, it's a sort of a mini institute base. So a lot of what happens in elite sport, stays within elite sport. Whereas in the States, athletes, they come and go. They go between teams, very often. They often have their own trainers. They often they're a little bit more independent in that regard. So what you find is there's more business for it. There's more awareness of it because of that. Whereas in Australia, what you're doing is you're almost educating the market because they don't know the difference between what happens in sport and everything else. Because if you walk into an elite sports gym and as you set yours up, it doesn't look anything like a fitness first. It doesn't have half that equipment. It doesn't spend any of that money. It's got everything to do with what's sort of going on in there. So I just think, I just have massive respect for going out on a limb and doing that in this country, and I think it's a positive step for any young athlete, and hopefully it's something that is a scalable business model for you and sort of is successful.
Well, you're way ahead of us there. I mean, as we're trying to obviously we want to branch out and interstate. We want to develop applied strength and conditioning sports science in Australia. But I think you're right in terms of you look at my performance centre, my gym, or the traditional gym in Australia, exactly what you said, Terry, machine-based weights, treadmills, a lot of mirror mentality approach where we've kind of broken it down and said, okay, let's bring it down to the bare basics. Olympic lifting platforms, squat racks, basic barbell, strength primal patterns to improve athlete performance and function, but also body composition change. And I said, fuck it, let's just go off this market. Let's change the game in terms of, I was sick of these kids regressing athlete potential. We've got so many kids, Terry, coming out of exercise science. Where are they going? They're not coachings in terms of athlete development. There's a market there for it, but no one attacked. And I said, well, I'm going to be the man. I'm going to make my company number one. We'll be the number one in Australia in terms of the private sector. You know, I really do, and this is for everyone out there, I really do appreciate guys like you, guys like Hampo, people like Suki, Joycey as well, who come out and they support the private sector in terms of applied sports science. I really do, from the bottom of my heart, I do appreciate the support you're giving me. You're a great guy. Hopefully I'll get you down to Woodford SSC soon. Hopefully we can do a workshop. I'll fly you down. It'll just be a great experience for a lot of the young kids out there who want to see the applied part of it, because you're so good at it. And in my opinion, it's an art to be a good coach, because you can have all the theory in the world, but if you can't communicate with your athlete, you can't get to know your athlete, you can't coach your athlete, well, you're useless then. You're redundant. So I think you're really great in that regard. Other than that, Terry, I want to thank you for joining us today on the podcast. Thank you very much for obviously allowing us a bit of your time and insight into the elite sector.
No worries, mate. My pleasure.
Beautiful. For all the guys out there, hopefully I'll be bringing Terry down the next few months. Terry's like me, he's got no time, but I'd love to bring him down, so hopefully we can work at a workshop from there. Other than that, guys, if you've got any questions for me, Christian at woodfordssc.com, you guys know where to find me. Other than that, guys, thanks for listening up, and this is a great podcast. Thanks very much, guys.